So once again, welcome to the Unshakable Foundation meeting of Cocaine Anonymous. This is a main share meeting, and today it's with great pleasure and lots of gratitude that we welcome Bill C, who's come to share on the topic of what is spiritual condition, for up to about 40 minutes, after which we'll open up the room for the Q&A portion of the meeting. So with that, Bill, it's over to you. Thank you for your service.
Thank you. My name's Bill. I'm a drug addict. Good to be here with you. My clean date is March the 27th, 1985. So in a few days, I'm going to be 40. I'm very impressed by that. I think that's pretty cool, actually. And all my friends, when I've been saying that for months now, they say, not yet, not yet. You know, you're probably not going to make it, but I'm feeling pretty confident. I think I'm going to make it. And we've got a big party planned here, so I better not be shit-faced when all these people show up. That would be really sad. So my favorite topic was asked, what's a good topic? And spiritual condition. In the big book of AA on page 85, it talks about the 10th step. And it says that the only thing that's going to save us, keep us clean and sober, give us a life with some purpose, maybe some intimacy in our relationships, the only thing that's going to do that is the maintenance of our spiritual condition. It also says that we're going to rest on these things called laurels, and we shouldn't do that as the years go by. Anybody that's been clean and sober for a while has probably rested on a few laurels if you have any. So if there's anybody here that's new or newer or struggling, the first job we have when we get clean is to get a spiritual condition so that we can then maintain it. Because I don't know about you, but when I got here, I didn't have one of those. I didn't have any kind of a spiritual condition. And over the years, as I look back over 4 decades of banging around with all you people, I've developed a spiritual condition, but it didn't happen right away. It took some years for that to happen. This recovery process of getting a spiritual condition that we can then maintain doesn't happen overnight. Doesn't happen right after I do an inventory or after I make amends. But that process, that is the process. These 12 steps are designed in order for us to develop a spiritual condition. So my first job in AA is to get one. What that usually means for most of us, I believe, is we get a sponsor and we start working the steps. It's more than just going to meetings and hanging out with the fellowship. It's about turning the fellowship into relationship. And that's something different than just showing up to meetings. Now, along this road of developing a spiritual condition, I'm probably going to generate some laurels. And what a laurel is a past achievement. If I get some commitments, if I start working with others, if I do some stuff, I'm going to start feeling a bit better about myself. I'm going to have some successes in recovery. I'm going to attain certain levels. Like we like to think there's a hierarchy, which there really isn't. But, you know, if you want to be a blooded member, you're probably going to do an inventory and make some amends so you can start bragging about it, what a badass you are. You're not like the lightweights that are just hanging out in the rooms. Have you ever noticed there's a lot of people that are incorrectly sober? You ever notice that? And they refuse to get loaded again. They just keep hanging out, but they're not doing it right. Right? And so these laurels, if I generate some of these past achievements, then I can rest on them and find out why that's not a good idea. That's going to take some years. I mean, it's going to take a while. And like I mentioned before, I look back on the time I've been around, involved in the 12 steps, 40 years. I can see phases that I've gone through. Now, when I got here, when I got sober, I was 37 years old. And I was on my second marriage, and I had a second set of 2 kids. And life was miserable. Like, you ever been up all night? I don't know about you, but there's nothing more depressing, very few things more depressing than when that sun comes up. Because at that time in my life, I'm a vampire, man. I don't come out during the day. I'm just out there at night. And there's certain spiritual truths. And one of those spiritual truths is alcohol plus money equals cocaine. and that's not an outside issue. That's an inside one. That's what cocaine's for, is for alcoholics to drink more. Now, I know there's some of you out there that just did cocaine by itself. You have no idea what you've missed, and it really helps to drink with it. And, but I'm up all night like I had been. This is the sad thing about when the sun comes up is, it's going to be another miserable day in a long, long line of miserable days. And I was up, and my 3-year-old daughter got up and saw that her daddy was up, and she was all happy about that. She ran up and crawled up in my lap, and it just broke my heart. It was one of those moments. And I think that what was going on with me is there was a realization that I wasn't a husband, and I wasn't a father, and I wasn't a son, and I was a nothing. Nobody gets into recovery with a lot of self-esteem. And the way I had lived the previous 22, 23 years doesn't lend itself to self-esteem. There's mental institutions and jails and all that stuff that comes with being what we are. And so that morning, like any good gangster, I called my mother. And she got there within a half an hour before I took a nap and changed my mind and checked me into a recovery place. And I spent 35 days in there. And while I was in there, they made me wear a sign around my neck. I had to make the sign. We made it in crafts. It was a little rectangular piece of cardboard with a string that went through it. And it said, "I am not a counselor." Because evidently there was some confusion about that. Then after 35 days, they let me out. They just let us out, don't they? Like we're okay. Go forth, multiply. And where do we end up? We end up here in a 12-step program, in Cocaine Anonymous or Alcoholics Anonymous or some kind of anonymous. This is the world's aftercare program. And all the insurance money runs out, and they're all done analyzing us and talking about our triggers and, all of the stuff that they teach us, which is all good shit. But this is where we're going to spend the rest of our life. We are the counselors here, aren't we? The inmates truly are running the asylum. You stop and think about this. I've been to a lockdown mental institution twice, and I've been married 3 times, and people ask me for relationship advice. Right? I give it to them. I figure, hell, you can't hurt them. It's like, plus I've had a lot of experience, So 2 things happened to me that are just pure luck when I first walked into a room of you. And the first thing is probably the most important thing. I just liked it right away. It's not everybody's story. I walked into this meeting. It was called the Gong Show. It was April of 1985, beautiful summer day in Hermosa Beach, California. And it was the day I got out of that recovery place. I wasn't very welcome at home, and I jumped in my car and drove to this meeting where this guy said he would meet me. And I walked in that room, and all the Harleys were parked out front, which was kind of intriguing. And the room was packed. Who knew that a meeting would be packed on a summer Friday evening, beautiful evening? And there was no room. I stood in the back of that room, and nicknames are flying around the room. One guy got up the podium to share, and they hooted at him so much he just sat back down. Clearly a very loved man in the room. And I got the joke right away. Some people talk about hearing the music. Later on, I would describe it like that. Like I wasn't expecting you. I didn't know this was going to be fun. I didn't think it was going to be funny. I didn't know it was going to be a good time. Did you? When you got here, did you think, oh, this will be fun? I wasn't thinking that at all. And I stood in the back of that room and I started laughing. You cracked me up. I didn't know I was going to run into you. Everybody was dressed up trying to hook up. A lot of people said it really wasn't an AA meeting. I went to it for 20 years. It's like, I thought, you're my people. I didn't know I was going to run into you. I didn't know you were going to be happy, you know? The second thing that happened is banging around a couple of weeks around that Alano Club. I asked the guy to help me. He just texted me. I've had the same sponsor for 40 fucking years. Can you believe that? I should have fired him several times, but he needs me now. You know, I make him look good. And I asked this guy to help me, and he actually did. Second lucky thing. Doesn't always happen. He actually helped me. And one of the things he said, I want you to go home and read the doctor's opinion and make notes in the margin of what you agree with and what you don't. Be at my house Thursday at 5 o'clock, and we'll discuss it. We talk about hitting bottom here, and I think what the bottom is, when we hit bottom, it's the collapse of the alibi system. You know, the story that we've been telling, the explanation that we have of why we are the way we are, right? That falls apart for some reason. And there's a window of opportunity for new information to come in. And that window closes, right? It reasserts itself. You know, the ego's job is to defend itself. And I have a persona that requires defense, right? But when this stranger said this to me, and it's not my MO to just do what you tell me. You know, that's not who I am. I'm the rebel without a cause, right? And I just did what he told me to do. And I went home and I read the doctor's opinion and I made some notes and I showed up at this stranger's house. I don't even think I knew his last name. And knocked on the door and he let me in and he sat me down in his little living room in this apartment he had down by the beach. And he did a very intimate thing with me. He didn't trust me that I'd read it, and he had me sit there and read it to him out loud. And he said some things to me those first couple of times we got together, because each week I went to his house and we read another chapter in the book and we talked about it. And one of the things he said to me, he says, my job as your sponsor is to guide you through the 12 steps, that you might have some kind of a spiritual awakening. Maybe develop a condition, a spiritual condition. You might have some kind of spiritual awakening and you'll never drink and use again because that happens here. Now, I would be happy to sit here and listen to you tell me what you think your problems are so that you will not share about them in the meetings. The meetings are for recovery from drug and alcoholism, not about how your day went. And I told him, down there at that Alano Club, they are breaking that rule right and left. Should we go tell them? It's like, he said, no. He says, they really can't kick you out. You can pretty much do whatever you want. They can't kick you out. I'm just describing to you my recovery, what I believe about my recovery. I think he's right. You know, 40 years later, I think that's right. I think that's what that's about, right? There's a difference between showing up and being part of, right? So the very first thing, back to spiritual condition, back to this whole topic that we're talking about here. First thing that this man wanted to know from me is whether I thought that I was powerless over drugs and alcohol. Now, for me, that was an easy answer because I was really tired and I was very ill. And I was a lot more ill than I thought I was. 8 years ago, last February, just last month, I had a liver transplant at 30 years clean and sober. So alcoholism and drug addiction almost killed me at 30 years sober. If I hadn't have got sober in 1985, I would have been dead a long time ago, and that is not an exaggeration. I had hepatitis C. I did a lot of intravenous drugs, and I don't ever remember cleaning a goddamn needle in my life. I may have, but I was stupid. And I had really bad cirrhosis. And it was a lot worse than I thought. And I got sick anyway. it was easy for me to say that, yes, I'm powerless. I was really tired. And I knew I was going to drink and use again, and I really didn't want to. And the reason I knew I was going to do it is because I'd never been able to stop before. I never really tried to stop any of that shit. I mean, like some of us do, I cleaned up my act. I quit shooting heroin for a while, and I do this and just smoke pot and drink beer. And, but I altered my consciousness almost daily for 20 plus years, and that's damaging to your body and to your mind. And I think what we suffer from here is emotional immaturity. I don't think we have alcoholic thinking or whatever. I don't think we're uniquely neurotic. I don't think we're much different than other people. We just have a tendency to kill ourselves, And so we're forced on the spiritual path to take a look at what that's all about, right? And we'd like to think that people say, well, what'd you do that for? Because I'm an alcoholic. No, maybe you're just fucking stupid, maybe you're just immature, like, how long are you going to use your alcoholism as an excuse for being a dick? It's like, come on now, own it, dude, own it. This is your stuff. It's not some generic thing that happens in 12-step recovery, and, pardon my language, it's a CA meeting. I feel freer here. And, and anyway, so it was easy for me to say, yes, I'm powerless. Now, what is a spiritual condition made up of? Well, the first pillar of spiritual condition as we're developing this is powerlessness. That's the first one, right? And any mystical path you go down, wherever it comes from, Hindu, Eastern, Northern, Southern, whatever it might be, all of them, every one of them talks about personal powerlessness. All you really need to know about God is it's not you. You're not running the show. Now, you can get into argue about concepts of God, which I'd rather not, because it's an experience, isn't it? It's a concept, it's not you stick around here long enough, it will come and visit you. And then you can label it with whatever makes you feel comfortable. But I'm not in the concept business. I'm in the experience business. And powerlessness is the first pillar. We have to realize, at first it's drugs and alcohol. 40 years later, it's everything. I've yet to find anything I have any power over. I talk to you incessantly about how if you were a little bit different, the two of us would get along a hell of a lot better. And you insist upon living your own life, and it pisses me off at my core. I've lost complete control over the geopolitical situation in the world. Look at it. No one from Washington, D.C. has ever called me up and said, what do you think should happen, Bill? 4 or 5 years ago, I shut the television news off. I wasn't emotionally stable enough to deal with it. Doesn't matter what side you're on. It's just nuts. And I don't live there. I live here with you. And I don't have any power over you either. So I'm utterly powerless. But this is where I live, right? If I can grasp the powerless thing, just the drugs and alcohol part, just all I need to do when I'm new, the second step becomes operational. I have to align myself with the power. What power? Who cares? As long as it's not you, Wilson wrote about the second step a lot, and what he talked about having is an open mind. That in and of myself, I can't keep myself sober. So there better be something out there that can help me do that. And these rooms right here are a great God. They're a great power because you all are a much power greater than myself. And the witnessing of you being sober and not being drunk and loaded is enough proof. All I need is that proof that I'm not alone, that this seems to be working and your lives are getting better. I don't have to have faith. I have belief because I watch it. I see it every day. Then the third step comes along. Now, the third step's interesting. The third step says that we're going to make a decision to turn our life and will over to clearly what already has it anyway. I think it was nice of them to lead us to believe that we actually have some say in the matter. Well, I've been withholding myself from the totality of all things long enough. I'm going to acquiesce now and allow you to take me. Thank you very much. Where's my trophy? Right? It's like, and we have these long-winded discussions about the difference between my will and God's will, as if that's even possible. My little ego, the 2.5-year-old, loves the idea of us having a battle of wills with the power that drives the entire universe, right? And I can tell you, maybe this meeting might be worth showing up, because I'm going to tell you exactly right now what God's will is. Could be worth you showing up here. Listen up. God's will is what's happening right now. What else could it possibly be? Right? Well, let's speculate on that, Well, I don't like what's happening right now. I'm looking for an alternative, and there is none. This is it. This is what we get, what's happening right now. And it's true for everybody, not just me. It's everybody. And what life and will is the third step talking about? It's the inventory, isn't it? The end result of living a life with seeming power. I have resentment, I have fear, and I have broken sexual relationships. And I make a list of that, and I share it with this stranger that I hardly know for some odd reason. Isn't that interesting that we do this? Isn't it interesting? Why do we do this? So I sat down with him and I read him my inventory. And what's the lesson in the fourth and the fifth step? What's the lesson? It's the second pillar of spiritual condition, the thing that we have to develop this spiritual condition. I have to stop blaming other people and institutions for my problems. High school is over. It's time for little Bill to own his own life, to take responsibility for his emotional state and his behavior. No more blaming. And this is going to take a decade or so, because this is ingrained in me. I have reasons and explanations, The reason I'm yelling at you is because of what you said. You're responsible for how I feel. If you didn't behave badly, I wouldn't be pissed off. So you're responsible for how I feel. And when I yell at you, you're also responsible for my behavior. Because if you didn't behave the way you behaved, I wouldn't be behaving like this. So I'm not responsible for anything. How's that working for you? I've been married 3 times. It's like, how's that working for you? And stop the blaming. This is going to take a while, but I can tell you this. If you surround yourself with some relatively healthy people in the program, not always older people are getting sober, your peer group, they will help you stop it. If you're in a group that really believes in working the steps and working with each other and all that stuff, these people will help you stop the whining. And it's going to take a while. It takes a while for it to stop. But the first thing I have to do is try and stop. Because in the inventory, what we're looking for is our faults and mistakes, right? It's our inventory, not the other person's. I mean, it's easy for me to list the resentments. You come up with that fourth column of what are my faults and mistakes. I'm having difficulty with that. I feel justified in my resentments and my anger. So that first inventory that I had didn't have much in that fourth column. The one I did at 10 years was filled. Because by that time, I knew it was me. I knew it was me. Then the next thing that happens is you want me to go make amends to these people that I resent in order to rid myself of the resentment, and I'm not doing that. This makes no sense to me, and also it scares the hell out of me. I just want to move on, forget the past, and move on now. And we don't do that here. We actually go back and try to clean up the past. And there's a lot of reasons to do that. One of them is to rid me of these resentments. And in that process, when I go to somebody that I don't ever want to see again, and I look them right in the eye and I say the words that need to be said, when I turn and walk away from that experience, I am changed right then and there. No waiting. This is a cathartic experience. The action of doing that will change me as a person. This is when the transformation really begins, because this whole thing is about being transformed, right? Changing my perception of the world around me. I need a transformation. Early in the olden days, they'd call it the conversion process, being converted somehow, seeing the world in a different way. The amends process is the powerful initiator of that process. It changes the story. And the third pillar of spiritual condition is nothing was ever personal. But it sure seemed personal, didn't it? I mean, I spent so much time blaming these sons of bitches. It's hard to let go of that. It seemed like it was really personal. But when I go in and make the amends, it changes the story. And what you start to realize is nobody was ever doing anything to me. They're just doing what they do, and I happen to be in the blast radius of their behavior. People are just doing what they do. They're not focused on me. Nobody's focused on me. And sometimes you're in my blast radius. I'm not focused on you. I'm just doing what I do, and you happen to be the next victim in line to my behavior because I can't control myself. Now, today in the world, if you go out in the world, there's a lot of assholes out there. They're out there. They're really out there. I mean, and you can bet they don't want to be that way. They just can't help themselves, right? And when you get approached by one of these assholes, you feel the need to straighten this asshole out. Now you've just leapt into his darkness. And I have to be responsible for that. From that point on, I'm responsible for how I feel and how I behave. He's not. They're not. It's me. If I choose to engage, that's on me. Doesn't mean the other person's innocent. But if I choose to be there, that's on me. Now, 1 through 9 is about 10% of the program. It's not the work. This is Sober 101. It's the first semester. It's what we have to do to develop a message with some depth and weight so that we can begin the real work in recovery. And the real work, 90% of it is in 10, 11, and 12. That's where we live. And back to page 85, spiritual condition. It's talking about the 10th step, right? Now, after the 9th step, I can tell you, when those 3 things come together, powerlessness, stop the blaming, nothing is personal. When those 3 things come together, that's the collapse of the egoic structure of who I am. This is my personality falling apart. This isn't necessarily a happy moment. And I can tell you, this kind of self-awareness without humor is depression, right? And in recovery, we help each other laugh at who we think we are, not who we really are, but who we think we are. And everybody's got a persona, everybody's got a persona they developed, I'm the tough guy biker dude, I'm whatever's happening at the time, I mean, I've got a clip-on earring because I don't want to hurt myself, but I look really good. I look like that character. And in recovery, I became the phony AA guru. At 10 years sober, I'm walking around like I'm all that, and I'm cheating on my wife and blowing up my family, Now, that second incarnation is a little healthier, but it's the same shit, isn't it? I've just taken on the first 10 years I was clean and sober, I was trying to make a name for myself in an anonymous organization. That's all I had to work with. That's me. If I'm going to be here, I'm going to run it. That's me. It didn't matter what the motivation was because I actually did the work. So I learned some stuff. I started falling in love with you. The motivation for what I was doing changed. The most important 5th step you'll ever be involved in is the first one you listen to. That's when the whole game changes. Then you begin to realize why you're here, right? I think there's a reason, So in that 10th step, the 4th pillar of spiritual condition is self-awareness as compared to self-obsession. It's not about digging deeper to find the root cause of my problems. It's about literally getting out of self. It's the antithesis of psychotherapy. It's not that psychotherapy is bad. It's just a different animal. That's not what's happening here. And some of us have scars that other people don't have. Therapy is a good thing. But what's happening here is the literal getting out of self. There's people in recovery that are doing inventory after inventory after inventory after inventory. Aren't you sick of yourself? Because I'm pretty sick of me, I find you a lot more interesting than me. And I will see myself through your eyes much better than I'll ever flesh it out on my own. You will reflect me back to me as I attempt to help you, irrespective of what my motivation is. I am impacted by this relationship. This is more than fellowship. It's a relationship, right? We don't know much about that. We don't know much about intimacy. There comes a point in the process of developing a spiritual condition where you stand there and you say, oh my God, it's me. It sure seemed like you, but I got it's me. I am the source of all the chaos in my life. It's me. This is not a happy moment, you know. You know, I tell you, self-awareness without humor is depression. Sometimes the appropriate emotional response is depression, right? Like people will tell you here when you're new, you got to learn to love yourself. Yeah, good luck with that shit, you know. Good luck. I don't know when I started loving myself, or liking me, just liking me. But it was, 10, 20 years sober, something like that, probably something along those lines, when I started feeling good about who I was. You ever tried to stand in front of a mirror and look yourself in the eyes? I couldn't do that when I first came in. Somebody told me I couldn't do that. I didn't like who I was. Somewhere around maybe 15 years sober, that began to change. I started liking who I was. I said, I think, you're not such a bad guy. You're okay. You don't lie to people. You don't cheat on people. You're okay. People call you, answer the phone. You show up. You really want to learn to love yourself. You put yourself at the bottom of your amends list. By the time you get there, you'll have some self-esteem. I started feeling better about myself when I started making amends. The last big one I had to make, I didn't make till I was 10 years sober because I was afraid. And when you do one of those at 10 years sober, you wonder, why the hell did I wait all that time? And transformation. In meditation, you can watch yourself think. In meditation, you can focus your mind on the breath. And the egoic mind, the one that carries within it the persona of who you think you are, the egoic mind, the working mind, the one that we talk about in the third person. We say things like, my head is out to get me. We make it adversarial because that's who we are. It needs to be crushed and killed and murdered. It's not the enemy. It's not trying to hurt me. It needs me for transportation. It's not some alien being that's entered in my soul. It thinks it's me. It thinks it's me. That's its job, is to create separation. That's what the ego does. Every human being has one. On the spiritual path, you're forced to look at that. And in meditation, you can focus your mind, that thinking mind, on the breath. And you'll notice that the egoic mind, the thinking mind, doesn't like being in the present moment. There's nothing for it to do. It wants to be in the future or in the past where it can have stuff to work on. So it wanders away from the breath. And you notice it has wandered away, and you gently bring it back to the breath. This is absolute, experientially conclusive proof that who I am is not my thinking mind. If it was, I couldn't catch it. Who is it? What is it within me that notices that it has wandered away and brings it back? It can't be that. There must be another consciousness within me. Isn't this fascinating? This is a game-changing experience. Eckhart Tolle describes this in the preface to Power of Now. This is a real thing. This is blue collar. It's not sitting in a cave for 3 years, naked, cross-legged. It's just like 3 minutes and you'll have that experience. Try it. Try to just keep your mind on your breath, and it'll wander away and then bring it back. You've had the experience. Evidently, now that I know this, now that I've experienced this, I don't have to go where it wants to take me. When it wants to go into depression or darkness, I don't necessarily have to go. I can choose not to go, evidently. Sometimes that's hard. Sometimes the darkness is attractive and I go there anyway. But I don't have to. When the anxiety steps in, I can say, thanks for sharing. I'm just going to move on with my day now, right? At 20 years sober, this became real. When I started getting sick with liver disease prior to the transplant, I started meditating with intent, meaning I need help. From what? I have no idea, but I need help. And I hear you guys talk about it all the time. And I started meditating with real intent, looking for some kind of intent, and I believe I received it. It did not change my situation, We want the situation to go away. But this whole thing is about having peace in the eye of the storm. The storm does not go away. Life is dangerous. It's also a lot of fun sometimes, but it's fraught with all of that. Can I be peaceful in the eye of the storm? And I've learned, yes, I can be. Not always with a lot of grace, but I can be quiet. I can realize that I can't change it. I can't change it. I have to relax into it. So maybe the pain doesn't go away. Maybe the situation doesn't go away, but the struggle goes away. The struggling against what is, So all the ego does is take the past and project it into the future over and over again. It's flat and two-dimensional. It creates nothing. It just takes credit for shit. But it's part of us. It's part of me. It's not a separate thing. It's part of me. But there's something else in me that can actually watch that thing operate. I think that's fascinating. It has changed my life, right? It has changed my life when I remember to do it. It helps. What I've taken to recently is praying out loud, right? What am I praying to? I have no idea, right? I don't have a belief mechanism around that. I have faith true faith is having no belief mechanism. Just everything is as it should be. How could it be any different than it is? It's some sort of universal consciousness or something. There's something that I'm able to tap into that's other than the egoic mind. Is it outside me? It seems to be, right? It exists a lot in nature. I notice it in nature quite frequently. I have a beautiful backyard back here with a big eucalyptus tree in there. And I sit there and I meditate on my eucalyptus tree. And I also don't forget that the space between the leaves is there also. That exists also. And I believe what happens to us is some kind of unifying experience where I realize I am not separate. I might have a separate identity, but the idea that I'm independent of other people is ridiculous. I am not independent. Our very first tradition in AA says our common welfare should come first. And we're not alone anymore. I depend on you. I don't think that's an illness. When they created Codependence Anonymous, they created an organization that every living human being qualifies for, And this dependence that we have on each other is not a bad thing. The problem that you and I have in recovery is that we don't do intimacy well because somehow we feel separate. The idea is to get rid of that feeling, that sense of separation. We're not separate. I get that today. One of the great blessings in my life is I'm not alone anymore. I mean, you can tell how spiritual you are if you're surrounded by people who love you. Is that an ego trip? No. We have a hard time with that. Sometimes we can show love. It's hard for us to accept it. Somehow we don't believe it's real. Right? When I was in the hospital, people were coming to see me. I felt myself be resistant. And I'm 30 years sober. I'm like an official guru. And I'm having trouble with intimacy. And I have enough self-awareness. I can see myself being resistant. But the truth is, I am surrounded by people that love me. You know why that is? Because you have made me lovable. When I got here, I wasn't. But today I am. And I can feel the love that you have for me. And I love that. It warms my soul. You love me because I love you. Now, I used to hear people say it's all about the love. And I said they should record themselves and play it back. They wouldn't talk that way. It's so stupid. And I can report to you today at almost 40 years, it's all about the love, ladies and gentlemen. That's what it's all about. And if you have a problem with that, that's your problem, right? Because here it is. The final pillar is compassion. That's the thing we're missing when we get here. That's the thing that selfish and self-centered, emotionally immature people are missing. They're so wrapped up in themselves, they don't have the capability of compassion for others. Now, we need people. We have arrangements. We don't have relationships. We have arrangements, You let me have sex with you and I'll support you. That's an arrangement, And what we have here that teaches us the compassion, which is what we felt when we first walked in the doors, is people were kind to us. Hopefully you walked into a room like that. That's what I walked into. People were kind. You remember the first person that remembered your name when you showed up at another meeting? You remember how that felt? Weren't you suspicious that they were so friendly? I was suspicious. I'd never been in an environment like that. The mechanism that's used for that is sponsorship. That's how we learn compassion. There's a difference between activity and action. I can get commitments. I can sweep the floor. It's all good. Flip hamburgers at the Labor Day picnic, show up to the roundup and all that stuff. That's all good. But that doesn't replace the real action. It doesn't replace the sponsorship of actively reaching out and trying to help another. Most important fifth step you'll ever be part of is the first one you listen to. I used to think I was the teacher and they were the students, and I realize now they've always been the teacher. When I ask for help, he sends me you. And I'll leave you with this thought. Think about this. You're in an organization where people's lives are saved every day, and the mechanism that's used for that is us. We're the tool. We're the channel. Keep the channel clear. Keep the channel clean. Be a good channel. We are the ones that talk to them. We give them rides. We read the book with them. We do all that stuff. That's why you're here. That's why we're here. They say you got to give it away to keep it. No, you have to give it away to get it. The way you get it is by giving it away. What you're really looking for is when you start giving it away, it'll open your heart like you've never experienced in your life. Thank you very much for letting me share.
Oh, you're muted again.
Hi, can you hear me? Hi, I just wanted to know, I really enjoyed your share. I thought it was so good. I just wanted to know how you got over all the shame and the bad things that you did when you were in active addiction. It's one of the things that I'm struggling with, the trauma that you've caused others, all of the bad things, because we've all come to this rooms doing at rock bottom. But thank you very much, and that's one of the most inspirational shares I've ever heard. Thank you.
Two things. I think the amends process did a lot for that. Going back and apologizing for all of that stuff, trying to own it, trying to clean it up as best I could. Sometimes I was successful, sometimes not. But the other thing is, probably even more so, is when you have that shame and that degradation and you're working with others and they share with you their shame and degradation, you get it. And the reason that they're sharing with you is because they know that. So my greatest weakness becomes my greatest strength. I think the most healing I've had in recovery is through that, trying to help other people come out of that. You'll hear yourself say things to people that you should be doing yourself. It's like, but when you start working with others, that is where that healing really comes. You make the amends and it cleans up a lot of it. But even to this day, in 40 years, I have memories that just make me tweak. I don't think I'll ever totally get over it, but it doesn't run my life anymore. Doesn't run my life.
Thank you, Reiko, for your question. Next up, we have Sophie. Sophie, would you like to come in with your question?
Thank you so much, Isaac. Thank you, Bill. That share freaking blew me away. Thank you so much. I was just wondering, you talked about meditating with intent when your liver disease took hold. And I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit more about what that meditation practice looked like. Thank you.
So, being an atheist in recovery, you have a really interesting spiritual pursuit. And I started listening to a lot of weirdos, like Baba Ram Dass was around at the time, got to meet him actually and hug on him and stuff. And my friend Wayne and I were going around trying to find something that we could grab a hold of. The idea of a God in the sky, that classic God, was just anathema to me. I couldn't imagine it. It's like, what's this all about? I would ask people, when they'd say, I have a personal relationship with a power greater than myself, I'd ask them, what do you mean by that? And people would, sometimes hem and haw, get pissed at you because they're just repeating something that they've heard. What I know now when I'm talking in front of a crowd of alcoholics or drug addicts anywhere, better than half the room has a problem with God. Even if they believe in a God, they have a problem with it. They have a difficulty connecting. And that was certainly my story. So at 20 years sober, this friend of mine saw me circling the drain. I'm on interferon trying to get rid of the hep C. I'm going through this process that took a decade. And I'm kind of circling the drain. And my friend Christoph came over and he handed me the book, The Power of Now. And he said, read this. And I said, I've read this non-dual stuff before. And he goes, God damn it, Bill, just read it. Shut up. So on the airplane going to lead a spiritual retreat in Hawaii, I was anything but spiritual. I read that book and totally described the situation of being in Vancouver. He's a young nerd, geeky weirdo, right? And he's having panic attacks. He's just a neurotic mess. And he wakes up in the middle of the night one night and he walks out into his living room in this little apartment he's in, raises his hand to the ceiling and he says, my God, I can't live with myself any longer. And the second thought that came after that was, well, if I can't live with myself, there must be two of me. I wonder which one is real. And I read that and I immediately identified this internal struggle that's going on. The ego is very resilient. It's very strong. It doesn't want to lose control. And I have a big one of those egos, no matter how degraded I might be. It's a heavy load for me carrying myself around. And so when I got to Hawaii and I was leading this retreat, I went up on this little hillside. And I think for the first time I meditated. And what I mean by intent is what was going on in my head is I need help. I can't, this is step one. It's powerless. I can't help myself. I can't fix me. And I meditated really looking for something. I didn't say this, but it's like, show me a sign or, I was sincerely looking for some kind of help, spiritual help. And I opened my eyes in the middle of this meditation in this little valley in Hawaii, and there was these beautiful trees on the other side of the valley, and the wind blew through the trees. And it wasn't blowing on me. I couldn't feel the wind. It was all visible, I could see it. And it was like a hand came down and just raked, and I just got it. Got what? I have no idea. But I had this feeling. It was much more of a feeling than a thought. And it was like, oh, there you are. It still chokes me up to this day, remembering that. I've had a few others since then. There you are. What? Who cares? There you are. And the times that I have real sincerity, when I cry out for help, I believe I receive it. But it doesn't look like you think it's going to look like, It doesn't change the situation. It just brings you peace in the eye of the storm. It's the acknowledgement, I am not in charge. Now that's easy to say. Try really getting there, And the times that I meditate or I ask for help, I believe I receive some help, usually in a change in my attitude or my mood. So that's what I mean by that, with intent.
Thank you, Bill. Next up, we have Ken. Ken, would you like to come in?
I think I'm unmuted finally. Bill, it was really great to see you and hear you as always. You were kind enough to invite me to speak for your men's stag down there at the Alano Club in Hermosa, which is a very unique kind of a place. And the funny thing is I got the same text as you were speaking, from your man. The question I have is, first I'll preface it with, I'm really glad you spoke about phases, because I thought that once we got here, it was all just going to be an elevator to the top, I never realized that after a set amount of years, you're going to crash and burn and almost destroy your life because of self-will gone riot. I've learned over the last 4 decades that my phases are about 6 years. At 6 years, I crashed and burned. At about 12 years, I crashed and burned. At about 18, I crashed and burned. And like you, when I was 20, they told me I had 6 months to live. That was a rude awakening. But you talked about your phases and positions of changing. What I'm wondering is if you ever had, and I'm going to phrase this loosely, have you ever had anything similar to what the Bill Wilson white light experience was? Because I used to pray for that experience. I used to pray for my dresser drawers to burn on fire, for a white light to come through the window. It never happened. I never saw a white light in Venice, not once. But what did happen was I was holding hands with Al Sines one time saying the Lord's Prayer, and by the time it was over, I couldn't speak. I was shaking uncontrollably, and I was crying uncontrollably. And I realized that that was my white light experience, even though I had not been looking for it. And I was wondering if you ever had anything similar to that. And I also talk to God out loud, and sometimes it ain't pretty. Sometimes there's some cussing going on, especially these last couple of years. But so could you tell us about any spiritual experience that you might have had personally? Thank you. Love you, man.
So sometimes when I pray out loud, I say, you said you'd help, now come across. No, I've not had anything like that. The experiences I had, the first one I had was when I did my fifth step. I was 6 months sober, and he told me to think about the guy that walked through my front door 6 months ago compared to the guy that's walking through it today. And I actually did that. I stood on my porch, and before I went in the door, I thought about it, and it struck me. I thought, it's going to be like this now. The old life, whatever that was, is over. Now, I think that's a remarkable insight. It's not a white light experience, but it's something that I realized that on March the 27th, 85, 6 months before that, something outside myself touched me and changed the course of my life, which is what happened to Bill Wilson, right? And some years ago, I was with a pretty big-time Indian guru on my little spiritual path, and he gave a talk, and my friend and I were with him, and we went into this back room after his talk in front of a bunch of people, and we're just the three of us are sitting there, and I start talking away like I do, and he starts laughing at me, and I said, what are you laughing at? He goes, I just love you alcoholics and drug addicts. I go, why is that? And he goes, well, the rest of them out there are trying to get awakened. You're just trying to figure out what the hell happened. And I think the fact that we're sitting in this room together tonight, all of us have had a life-changing experience, or we simply wouldn't be here. I think that's enough, And the white light experience, my sponsors had one. People have had them, but it certainly hasn't been my experience. But I'm comfortable with the ones I've had. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. And lastly, we have Brent. Brent, would you like to come in with your question? I think you just need to unmute yourself, Brent.
Yes, I was waiting. Sorry about that. I tried. It wasn't allowing me. Hi, I'm Brent. I'm an alcoholic. Thank you for chairing the meeting, and great to hear you, Bill. And God bless, brother. That was sweet. So I guess my question is I've been sober like 32 years, and I've had a fantastic sobriety, and I kind of got, I got blessed from from the get-go, and always have been, and really haven't had any struggles outside of the demons that I fight in my head. And I like what the gentleman said about like every 6 or 7 years, but I think probably the last 3 or 4 years I've really been struggling with getting on with others, especially at work. Just a tremendous amount of fear, and I've just really been struggling like a good solid 3 years. There's a lot of stuff that kind of went on, and I've been throwing myself back into AA and working with others, and there's still like this emptiness, and those demons in my head are still like trying to bring me down, and I think probably you enlarged on it with some meditation, but I wonder if you could just touch quick on that, as when you've struggled with these struggle, or when you've had these things come up in sobriety where you're fighting these demons and this, the disease in our head, the ego. I think it's ego and lack of humility mostly that I'm struggling with. How did you? What are some of the other helpful things that you've been able to, impart in your sobriety? Thanks, brother.
Well, I think that the understanding is, after a while, after going over it and over and over again, and what I repeat a lot is I find that I am the source of all the chaos in my life. Now, that's an easy thing to say. But for most of my life, it was you. You're the problem. All those people. And I just looked at an inventory I did. I was probably 10, 15 years sober. And it was the whole resentment list was AA people. And my understanding now is, and what the process of inventory is, you come to realize it's you. It's not them. They are who they are, just doing what they do. Anytime you have a conflict with another person, it's a great opportunity to look at your ego and watch it defend itself. And I believe what's happened to me, and it certainly isn't zero, but today, I am really not concerned about what other people think of me. And it isn't because I don't care. I've just come to understand that my opinion of you says more about me than it does you. And how do you learn that? By looking at that, by doing inventory, by realizing that I look across the room and a guy walks in a room and he's dressed a certain way and I pigeonhole him. I don't know him. I've never said anything to him. And yet I'm capable of judging. Today, I just don't give that judgment any energy. Therefore, your opinion of me, you're probably a lot like me. It says more about you than it does me. So why should I be worried about what your opinion of me is? And I don't even know anyway. I'm just looking at you you're looking at me with a funny look on your face. Maybe you're just having a gas pain. And I think you don't like me because I'm self-obsessed. And once you see that, once you can really see that, it's the beginning of the end of it. Self-awareness doesn't mean the behavior changes. It just means you stop blaming other people for it. And once you can finally see it, it's really hard to keep behaving the same way. You will for a while, but eventually you let go of it because it has nothing to do with them. Nothing is personal. Nothing is personal, right? And that's a hard one to grasp, but I think that's what happens after a period of time. It seems to have happened to me. And is it 100%? No, hell no.